All right, I think we're live. This Hangout is for the POCs, and it's on creativity. And does anybody have anything before I get started? I want to go through the definitions first so we're all on the same page. All right, definition of creativity. I will share my screen. Definition of creativity, according to Merriam-Webster Dictionary, the ability to make new things or think of new ideas. And so we can kind of already, if you've seen the video, see some problems with that definition. According to Jacques, it is a broad frame of reference. This is what he said in the video. And then I also wrote here, the ability to understand where uniqueness comes from, or the ability to identify the reference. So let's talk about that. More so like how society as a whole defines creativity and how the Venus Project, i.e. Jacques, and likely most of us define creativity. Hey, Zach, just mute your mic real quick, man. Anybody on creativity? Hello?
Oh, should we just jump in?
Yeah, please do.
I would say I put this in the document, but basically the overarching idea here is that people's creativity is derived from some kind of experience in the past, and that people use associative memory to do what the public would say is creative, when really they're just taking prior experiences and blending it into a unique configuration. And people think normally in society, as opposed to what we think, that creativity is inborn or that it's given to you hereditarily by your parents or so on, or that it's just a gift, which is why people use that word gifted, as if it comes from somewhere within genetically. I think that's the basis of that, but they don't understand that really it's something that you took from some experience you had in the past and did it in your own way, or it just influenced you somehow rather than it coming from within you.
All right, anybody else? So I assume from silence that we got this. Let's move on. All right. Please jump in. Don't feel like you're interrupting anything, because I don't want to go on while somebody wants to talk about something. So obviously the idea is the perception or what is taught in education about creativity can be counterproductive to human progression. That's kind of the idea I want to get across with this idea, and then I want to eventually try to tie it back into the Venus Project or resource-based economy. Why is it important that we talk about creativity? How is it currently detrimental to society, at least the perception of it, and then how can we correct that? And obviously, we're here right now through education. So, all right, so to define, he talks about reference. We have to define referent. Referent is the thing that a symbol as a word or sign stands for. So you'll hear Jacques and many of us say referent. If you don't know what referent means specifically, then you could be just going over your head. So when talking to others about these subjects, it's really good idea to get the definitions down first between you and whomever you're speaking, and then the conversation can be very specific. So physical referent, when we talk about it, is an actual referent, an idea, or no, I'm sorry, an experience or actual thing that can be touched, point to. That way, you're not thinking in the abstract about some other subject or idea or object. Can somebody help me out with that? Just making sure that we know what a physical referent is when it's talked about, and making sure when you guys are talking to others, how another person can understand what we're talking about with a physical referent. I think people can nod their heads and say, yeah, I understand what that means, but then If they only 50% understand it, then the rest of the conversation, you're only getting 50% efficiency out of it.
I think
So,
go ahead.
okay, if I understood correctly, for example, car, let's say I use the word car, that is just a word, but the actual car that I can touch is the referent for that word. Is that correct?
I think so. Or you
Sean,
can
we
also,
can't hear you.
Sorry about that. Saying if you touch a car, it's not great. It's good, but it's not extremely accurate because the concept or idea or actual physical car can all be different. What we're trying to narrow down is you are on the same page. You're looking at the same nearly exact thing as the other human is. Therefore, your communication is that much stronger. So if you were to talk about this specific car and touch it and point to it, then that makes sense. But with a concept of a car, an automobile, a thing that might have 4 wheels, 6 wheels, 18 wheels, these types of things, then you have to be dealing with much more specific reference. So specific reference are very important in this area. And then I went further and I defined, because in the definition of reference is symbol. It's a symbol for, because the words that we're using right now are simply symbols for that physical reference. So what is a symbol? An action, object, event, etc. that expresses or represents a particular idea or quality. So within symbols, we're attempting to get clarity without having to point at the physical reference. But in many cases, this can actually be something that takes away from the data, takes away from the information accuracy. Symbols are helpful and also not helpful. So anyway, as long as we have creativity, reference, symbol, anybody have anything on the definitions? Is there more definitions we should define before moving on?
Yes, I didn't quite understand the difference between referent and symbol.
Well, when defining reference, I just went to the dictionary. Inside the definition of referent was symbol, so therefore I felt the need to define symbol. That's all it was for.
Yes, but I mean,
the referent. I understand a referent can be a thing that we can experience through our senses, which is not the same with the symbol. Symbol can be something like a letter or a number, something drawn by our hand, or a word made up by more symbols, by more characters, by more letters or numbers. But the real referent is something physical which we can feel in a certain way, or we can measure through some technologies.
I think I just found our problem, and that is that I used the Merriam-Webster dictionary definition of reference, and it's not sufficient because it uses the word symbol, which isn't correct at all. A symbol is something that can represent a multitude of reference and ideas and concepts. So a symbol, a star, can represent the entire religion if we wanted to. Whereas a physical reference, that's a broad thing. It's not specific, and that's the opposite of what we're attempting to do. We're attempting to be very specific. So we found another problem. So in this Merriam-Webster is what is used in the westernized world in the education systems. So you can see we're miseducating people, and we're not being very specific at all. So
Sorry, Sean. What I read here on Merriam-Webster's dictionary about the referent, they're saying that the referent is the thing that a symbol stands for. He means that the thing for which the symbol stands on, the referent. It doesn't say it's a symbol.
I'm sorry about that. Yeah, my misinterpretation.
That's all right, no problem.
Thanks.
This is semantics. We're talking about physical reference, and also I had a question. What about an RBE? There's no RBE, so there's no physical referent for an RBE.
Well, it depends what you mean, the physical reference for RBE, because it means a resource-based economy, and there are, I would say that I can see parts of RBEs, not a total RBE as Jacques Fresco describes it.
I think what Arnaud is saying is that it's not necessarily physical. It can be a concept or something physical, but it's something prior that you can refer back to.
Well, as I understand, there cannot be a referent without some physical objection of it. Like, for example, a pen, this is a pen, but the symbol for the pen can be the word which we write, the pen. When we write the word pen, that can be the symbol for the pen. Or the drawing of this pen can be a pen, but this is the referent as I see it.
The referent is that your pen is actually a tool to write down ink on paper. That's the referent, not the word or anything else. It's a tool. That's the referent of a pen.
Well, that's a process what you are describing. I'm using this thing for that process, exactly, but we refer to this one.
But then we still haven't defined it. Again, this is semantics, and then we can keep going on defining
But
exactly
there is
what
no
we
need.
mean.
Okay, let me ask you something then. Was there first a stone or a definition for a stone?
What do you mean?
I mean, the stuff just exists around us, but we people start to make up all kinds of abstractions and symbols for those physical things that exist.
There was definitely the stone first, or we'd have nothing to refer back to. But it also applies to non-physical things too.
Okay, I agree with you. For example, electricity. You cannot sense it directly. It doesn't have dimensions, but you can measure with some technologies. And that exists, but it is the abstraction. We invent all kinds of abstractions or symbols to express that electricity, but it doesn't matter that the referent is not the electricity. We describe it in many ways so we can understand that that is exactly what we mean by that electricity.
This would be an example of what Jacques talks about later, of the necessity of locking our frame. And for this purpose, and locking our frame of creativity, defining it, understanding what Jacques talking about it, and tying it back to the resource-based economy, is that our communication, nearly everything we do is fairly inaccurate. And in many cases, it's extremely inaccurate. And the use of physical reference increases the accuracy of which our research, our communication, nearly everything we do. It is that simple, at least for this purpose, and then locking our frame right now. Of course, we can go all kinds of tangents, but the point Jacques talking about with this, when you're talking about pen, it's very, very helpful to be pointing at, touching both people at the pen, and that just increases accuracy of information flow. That's really as far as we're going. I'm sure we can go further than that, but we don't need to.
Can I just ask, because I didn't really understand it. So I have here written, or maybe it's backwards, it's pen. So which one is the referent? This one or this one? As I understand it,
the one in your right hand.
This is the referent.
Yeah, the one in the...
Okay, so this is the referent, and this is the symbol, pen.
Yes.
Okay.
All right, Hollis. All right, what am I doing? Okay, let's move on. Now, I'll leave it up to you guys. You guys want to... I have some bullet points like I did last time. I'll try to be quicker about them this time. Or would you rather just go into your questions and deal with those right now?
Sure.
Well, was your bullet points added to the question sheets, or you have like a separate sort of agenda?
Yeah, I made a separate sheet for that. There just wasn't room on the question sheet. It would just get really big.
I mean, let's just try to fit everything within our allotted study time frame.
All right, that's not an answer.
Well, I'll go through your agenda. Sure.
Yeah,
I vote Sean's agenda.
Yeah, there's a link in the question sheet, and you can open the doc. I think if we go through that first, is most constructive. Then we cover those points, and then we can move on to
All right.
questions.
All right, well, I'll start with this so we don't delay. And just a really quick explanation. These are for future use. So if somebody steps in and hosts this, one of you next time, you have this as a guide to assist you. Whereas the questions from the people participating might not necessarily assist you through making sure that certain things went over. So this is just a beginning of that type of a guideline to these hangouts. Anyway, I'll get started. Jack talks about imagination, that it is combining physical reference and experience. And then I put that there's nothing in there that is magical. And contrast that to society and perception of today, where people believe, many people, I don't have any percentages to work off of, but many people believe that things are inborn and magical, and it's just inspiration, these types of things. And they don't understand the root causes of these types of things.
And there's a lot of unsane individuality. It's sort of relevant for this lecture about creativity. Does anybody know what I mean when I say unsane individuality? For example, if something is not constructive for the rest of society or for people, Jacques in one of his lectures, he talks about a dance. If I do this or whatever, I can say, oh, that's my individuality and I'm being creative, even though creative is a nothing word, but it's unsane individuality. It's not something that is constructive or adds anything to the well-being of people.
But dancing is good for health. It's exercise. Isn't that constructive in some way?
In that sense, you're correct. But for the purpose of just being an individual or doing something that hasn't been done before, just for that purpose, it's unsane.
I guess this is like where some people object to us losing our individuality when, you know, I guess transitioning to a resource-based economy. I've gotten that objection quite a lot, that, you know, people are just going to be uniform and, you know, everybody's going to have the same thing. So maybe that sort of unsane individuality is something that is going to be like an old world mentality that, you know, certain people will try to hold on to. And it may not be detrimental, but it'll still be them exerting their free will to be individuals, I suppose.
I think perception of individuality today is just people not understanding how things work. If they did, they would realize exactly how in line and how copy-paste they actually are. And Jacques and Roxanne specifically describe that in the future, in a possible resource-based economy, you would have more supposed individuality, in that case, more freedom than you do today. So it's just a matter of perception of today and in education. All right, anything else on that? He talked around, oh, go ahead.
Yeah, where does is there a neurological basis or psychological basis where we, if somebody comes up with an idea, that we attribute it to, well, being gifted, like Clifton said, or anything else? Is there some explanation for it? Why we view creativity this way? Just a lack of understanding, or is there more to it?
I would guess that it's just lack of awareness and understanding, and it's just assumptions that are passed down culturally.
I think it had, one of these days I'm going to be able to explain it well, but it has to do with the level of complexity. And if you want to talk about the neurology of it, it has to do with associative memory. Associative memory is a direct example of how your previous experience can come into light now. You might not remember it, and you'll think it's novel. You'll think you're coming up with a brand new idea. So it has to do with our faulty memories, and it also has to do with levels of complexity. So once a thing becomes too complex, it either takes a lot of brain power, a lot of focus, a lot of previous education to even be able to get to that level of complexity. And what most people do, and it's fine, is that they just shun it off as too much. It must be God. It's too complex. It must be magical and those types of things. I just think it's one more level of complexity past our current capabilities, or that individual's capabilities of comprehending. I don't know. Maybe somebody can help me explain it. I'll work on my explanation. All right. I'll use the example of rocket science. Everybody says, "Oh, it's not rocket science." That's an example of somebody just going, "Oh my gosh, it's just too big, too awesome," or "This is such a simple task, it's not rocket science." Therefore, implying that rocket science is actually complex, whereas I think it's not complex. It's simply one more step above the normal day-to-day complexity. Actually, maybe 2 steps. But you can take yourself there. If every day is a level 1 or level 2 complexity where it's black or white, this or that, yes or no, and then there's maybe you get to level 3 complexity to where you're dealing in the gray area. And rocket science is simply level 4, level 5 complexity at the most. And it's just taking in, when you're dealing with a problem, 1 + 1 = 2, well, now you're dealing with 1 + 1 divided by x squared equals whatever. It's not magical. It's simply more levels of complexity. And once it gets too far with our lives, our day-to-day lives, we don't have time to solve those type of issues. We have kids, we have jobs, we have distractions, we have whatever bullshit that goes on throughout the day. So those level complexities must become magic to us. They must become rocket science to us, and therefore we just shun them off. But it is understandable. And as we improve our education, these levels of complexity, we'll be able to advance through them much easier.
I want to ask you, is like the term or the phrase "levels of complexity"? Is that like your own like personal phrase that like you kind of just use?
I think so, but it's obviously not.
Well, I think it's very interesting because I view the way you were describing it. I kind of view sort of human knowledge that same way. When you look at theoretical physicists or people who are just really high up on the tip of human knowledge, what they know is not out of anybody else's reach. It's achievable because when you start, like you said, when you start getting to that level 2.5, level 3, and you start seeing those areas of gray, you can understand that, okay, where that person is, that level 5 person, all they did was just, just went through the levels. It's not like they were chosen to be there.
Practice a specific level 4 complexity for 4 to 6 to 8 years in college, and they can do it when they focus on it. It's not a thing we can probably do 24/7. That's maybe our brains are, more dealing in the 2 or 3 level, But I have a chart. I want to make it into a graphic, but essentially I think the vast majority of the world deals in level 1, level 2 complexity, and that has to do with our education. As you get higher educated, I think you can deal with higher levels of complexity. It's a pretty simple concept, and I think with our world the way it is now, people don't have the time or the capability or the education to even delve into those areas. So that's where we get the things like magic and astrology and religions and these types of things.
I also think people are scared to even go up those levels of complexity as well. They fear, the vast knowledge, and they don't want to undertake the task of getting to where the person with the PhD is.
I'm not exactly sure where at what level this comes into play, but also remember that our brains use a lot more energy than anything else, and our bodies are used to conserving energy by whatever means necessary. And so if we try to constantly go up a level in our thinking, then we're not conserving very much energy, and so it's easy, without even thinking, to just not mess with it and put it off on something else maybe.
Well, I think we could simplify or make human knowledge more accessible or more feasible for people instead of making it so convoluted and complex the way it is right now. You know, maybe we can eventually be able to teach level 3 in, you know, level 2 and level 1 terms.
I think that's possible. I just think it comes down basically to the fact that the way the human brain evolved, this is how I've had it explained, is that it became useful to group things together and to classify them because it was a survival mechanism, and we tend to do that because we had to make quick, fast decisions while we were evolving to what we are now. So it became almost a requirement for survival. It became a useful tool to survive, to be able to make quick judgments and classify things into broad groups. So we tend to keep doing that with daily life, especially when we're busy and we don't really want to think about it. It's just easier to package it in a nice category so you don't have to think about it anymore.
But heuristics and biases and fallacies is a different topic. And the first claim of Dustin that people don't think for some evolutionary need to preserve energy, I have to see citation for that. So far I can't really comment on it. But
I think it's possible. I mean, the human brain uses quite a bit of our energy total for its mass. So that would save some energy in the long run. If you were trying to survive and calories were rare and that made a small difference, that would be something that would survive rather than not.
But this is speculation, and the topic of today is creativity. So let's get back on it.
I don't mean that it's actually something they consciously think about. I just mean that it's something that, if you want to say unconsciously, happens, and so it allows them to more easily just push things off without giving any thought to it. If their brain is going to have to work harder, then it's something that's easy to ignore when you're looking for more calories and saving the calories you have.
Do you have any citation, or is it just pure speculation?
No, I've actually read several books on it. I don't have them right now. I'll have to put those in the question sheet, I guess.
I think it makes sense. Why not?
Yeah, it's not reaching too far. We're not making claims and findings out of this. We're just discussing it. But I mean, Arnaud has a point. We simply don't have the time right now to do that. But maybe in a more advanced session we could do it later. All right. Yeah, but it seems to make sense to me. But again, Arnaud's correct. If we're gonna try to be scientific. All right, so next thing, Jack talked about, I guess he did. He talked about associative memory, and and I don't know what your guys' level of understanding of neuroscience is. Mine is very limited, but I do have a decent grasp of it, and how associative memory works, how neurons create pathways, how they're reinforced through myelin sheaths. This is extremely useful in understanding what associative memory is, because then once you understand what associative memory is, you can apply it back to how people interact, why memories are lost, why memories are reinforced, why dogmas are believed. Not specifically why, but you can kind of get a better idea. And tying it back into the imagination is simply pulling from old neural associative memory. And it is a very physical phenomenon rather than an imaginative, magical. So understanding neuroscience is extremely helpful. And I don't know your guys' level. Many of you could be far surpassed mine, but understanding how memories are formed, 3 levels of memory, how they are reinforced, you can then begin to understand how they come up later on in creativity. Can anybody help me out with this subject?
So we could say when you learn something new, neurons make pathways with other neurons, and that's what our memories basically are. and if you review those memories, then they become stronger. If you don't review them, over time they become weaker and die out. I mean the pathways, the new connections.
What do you mean by reviewing, though?
I mean, when you use some skill, for example, or if you're a biologist and you use your knowledge of biology all the time, you are reviewing your material. So the things you learned become more, how to say, connected, more stronger. The connections between the neurons become more stronger. We can't hear you.
It's simply reactivating the pathways. If they're not used long enough, they become weak and maybe even fall off. But if they're reinforced, they become more and more protected. I like to envision them as like roads or highways that need repair, that need maintenance, that need to be used. And if they're not, they're thin. They're tiny little dirt gravel roads, and it's really hard to figure out what that one thought was. Whereas if it's a 5-lane highway, you're going to remember. You're going to understand it better. But this is a huge topic off the side. My simple point was, if you don't, and if the viewers and the people you guys will eventually teach don't understand associative memory, I think it's a really strong prerequisite to be more capable of going into topics like creativity and understanding the scientific basis for it.
Yeah, I posted the link. It's called a schema, and it's a psychology study of how we associate words with whole other words and concepts. So if I mention a certain word, if you're an atheist and I mention God, then there lights up all sorts of memories with the word God. And if you're religious, then you have a different schema into what words are associated with it. So, yeah.
By the way, talking about levels of complexity, the neuroscience could be one of the highest levels of complexity, or at least the brain itself, that we are currently aware of. So it's not a simple subject. So don't feel bad if it takes you a while, or it takes anybody a while. It's an important subject, and it really assists with a lot of these topics we go over. All right, so Jack talks about being original, and that it is simply something without reference. Therefore, there is no originality. Oh man, I had this. I just can't remember how I had it. My associative memory is failing. I thought it was a really important point. I was trying to figure out a way to talk about it. If something is original, if there is something out there that is original, is due to it not having a physical reference or a reference at all. But if everything must have a reference, then there is no such thing as originality.
Well, in my notes, I've always had this kind of like notion, or I heard this a long time ago, that there really is nothing original left in the world, because, you know, you as a human, you know, you take the knowledge from your environment, from all over the world. You are a product of, you know, all of the world's knowledge. You don't arrive at anything that you know by yourself. There was some sort of, you were somehow introduced to, you know, the level of knowledge that you have now. So it's truly impossible, in my opinion, to like really have anything entirely original, because that means from the moment you were born, there was no external stimuli or anything introduced to you from your environment, and you somehow just came up with, you know, something completely unrelated to whatever exists out there. And that would be like the strictest form of originality, you know, that I could define right now. Even in the lecture when Jacques says, you know, you can make up a language, you know, in like Zababubu, but even that's not even original, because, you know, he's using English sounding letters to create, you know, just a language that is incomprehensible. So, you know, even trying to create a new language isn't even original, because you're going to have some sort of reference to some sort of older language to build it off of. So yeah, I kind of do agree that it's really impossible to be original in today's world.
What about a new scientific breakthrough? Is that original, or how would you define that?
Well, a scientific breakthrough would mean that they've been studying for quite some time on a pre-existing problem, and they've been using whatever body of human knowledge they have on that problem, and I guess brainstorming, or using those old reference to somehow in different ways, or using those old reference in unique ways to come up with a new solution. But in the end, a scientific breakthrough wouldn't occur if there was no previous body of science to even base it off of. All of those scientific breakthroughs, probably existed, a few centuries or a few millennia ago. They were already done. In this current age, most of the body of knowledge we have now is what we're going to build off for the future. So, yeah, I don't think even a scientific breakthrough couldn't be entirely original. It could be innovative to say the least, but I wouldn't say it could be original.
And this is where the semantics come in, because original would be without referent, but something can be new, or at least a new combination of things. And how would you, then we need a new word for that.
That's relative, though. That's what we talked last week. It's only new relative to your prior experience. Could be very old concept to something like the universe. But yeah, like you're saying, we're getting way too far off. And original, I think Jacques, maybe he does talk about old words, old language, and I don't know how much you guys understand about the old words compared to the new words, but Jacques is trying to improve our current language, which is English, and he tries to talk about the old language, and old language being things like love, anything without physical reference would be something with as old language. And so I don't have it in any of my notes. I don't know if one of you has it in your questions, but original could possibly be. But I think what the real problem is, it's again another definition problem, another semantic problem. The actual definition of original is from origin. I don't even have to look it up. It's from origin, from the origin. If you are the origin of an idea or the origin of the concept, then in that sense, as long as you're not implying that concept was novel to that person, then the definition is fine. But what we talk about, as far as I know in culture, as far as the definition of original, it's not based on that. It's based on this. It has a lot of things tied into that, which is metaphysical, and that's what we want to try and move away from.
I think we're gonna just have to, like Jacques mentioned, we're gonna have to move towards changing the way we perceive the word or many words, changing our definition of original. So from whatever we understand original now can be known as he says in the lecture, original just means it's based on lesser known references. So regardless, it's like you can't be objective. Everybody nobody can be objective because everybody's influenced by their environment in some way. Same way nobody can really be original because everybody has physical reference ingrained in them. So the new definition would just have to be using lesser known reference, which is it's still acceptable, it's passable, but that's just we're gonna have to adapt to our language because our environment is changing.
So talking about semantics and the word original, why don't we just start calling it pseudo-original and create a new word for it? It's pseudo-original. See, so I just changed our language and improved on it. It's not original. It's pseudo-original.
Yeah, even your pseudo-original word is pseudo-original.
Exactly.
Can I have two things here. I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
No, because I think Jacques said in the lecture that originality is combining known elements in unique ways. What do you make of that?
Yeah, that's pretty much what I would say pseudo-original is you're taking known things and just rearranging them into a new format.
So what normal people think when talking about originality is something without a reference, something that came out of our mind, out of the ether or something like that. But what it really is combining known elements in unique ways. I mean, in new ways. And what is new? It depends on the person. Something can be new for me, but not for you. So.
Well, I think those lesser known, I mean, those known elements that he was referring to are still lesser known reference.
Yeah, but by whom? It's different for every person.
I would say it's lesser known if you're not within that field of knowledge or if you're not within that area of practice. So let's say if I'm a musician and I combine, samba music with, African beat music, if you weren't in the music field, you wouldn't really know the origins or the styles, what I'm talking about. But there are people within the music field who do know what I'm talking about. So that makes it known. It's known to people, but it's a lesser known reference because it still exists within a certain sphere of knowledge. So let's say I combine that and I create something different, people would look at me as original, but it would, like, I guess Clipson would say, it's very pseudo original.
It's like you can keep going on this too, and the issue is we have to be a little bit forgiving in a sense that we want to get this point across to people without delving into the absolutism, which is, can we use the word original? Is it applicable? So what we simply want to do is just get into people's minds that there is nothing metaphysical about new ideas. They have origins, and they come from other things, and that's really what I want to make sure you guys understand, and what I would hope that you attempt to make others understand, right? And as usual, we can go way further than this. I'm happy to, but in a sense of needing to move on, we don't have to go too deep into things.
All
right, because we still got to go through the questions, and we got 10 minutes left. All right, we talked about locking your frame. I think this is a really important subject. I got all kinds of examples. I've been doing this type of stuff for like 6 years, and there's all kinds of arguments. And what's interesting is both parties can be actually accurate or correct, and forgive my language, but they can be right about what they're talking about. But it's one person has locked their frame reference in this time frame or place, and then another has locked their time frame. So, for example, we've had thousands of TeamSpeak conversations, and people will be arguing about money. And one person will be saying, money is useless, money is worthless, money is da-da-da. Another person will be saying, but we need money, we have to raise money, we have to do this. It's interesting because you probably found yourself in these types of conversations, maybe on both sides of it. And the thing is, both sides are actually correct in their sense, in their time frame. In a resource-based economy, money is absolutely useless. Right now, a POC that needs to raise money for a fundraiser and rent a hall, money is absolute necessity. So what I'm talking about, the being able to lock your frame, not only about a specific time frame, a specific subject, and focus down on that subject and really get some progression done. Otherwise, you're off on hundreds of tangents, and there's really little progression done. So I think you guys might have got something else out of what Jack was talking about there, but that's essentially what I got out of that part.
This is context. Is it?
And also, another way to say that is that, yes, we need money in the system that we've got right now, but money has no physical reference. If you look at everything from a resource perspective, So it's a matter of thinking smaller, which is the way we do now with money, because that's how our system was built. But if you look at it globally, you know, money really has no purpose.
And I can imagine hundreds of scenarios where we all might be out there talking to other people trying to educate them, and we get caught in an hour-long, 2-hour-long, week, year-long discussion or argument about money. And the thing is, if you can understand to back off of that, maybe be a tiny bit more objective, or attempt to be anyway, and understand what context you're in, what situation you're dealing with, you can more appropriately move along the conversation to progress and get through the topics. Otherwise, you can go in circles, and that's not efficient at all. So locking your frame is really important. Okay, next, functional. Use minimal materials, maximum safety, and usability. I don't know exactly if this is applies. Does anybody want to talk about this? Just something Jacques mentioned about architecture. So maybe I can delete that from this.
I can add something about this.
Okay.
Functional within material use or architectural use of material, or whatever design you, how the things are designed, it matters on the best way. It will be to use the designs appropriate to the stress, the distribution of the stress in materials. For example, if the cup here, I am holding it here, the most stress is going here, so there is no need to make same thickness or a piece the same thick on this on the other side the same too. It's enough only on one side. So this means that we can economize the material. Do not make it all the cup like this with one thing. Just as an example. And also it depends on the safety. Of course, when the things are calculated related to stress distribution, it takes in consideration the safety of people and of the things and some of their usability.
Cool. Again, this is a tough one, but I do see a lot of chatter going on about objectivity. Do you guys want to go over objectivity real quick? Well, I don't know if we can do it quickly.
Yeah, Jacques defines it as without influence or without background, so it couldn't exist, but then we get into the semantics, like water has 2 hydrogen atoms and 1 oxygen atom. Is that objective reality?
I think it's our relative measurement of what we think reality is.
We're probably going to need another hangout discussion for what you just said.
Well, again, I think we're going a level past a level of complexity. Maybe this applies here, past the necessity of this specific frame of reference.
All right.
We need, if I may say so, I tried to think about it, and I cannot come to a conclusion or to any definition without first defining what is truth. So I think if we really go into it, we need to understand what is reality, what is truth, what exists. It's a discussion for later.
Yeah.
Okay. We can even BS about it after we finish this.
Well, concerning the whole water molecule objective reality, I would just go on into that science itself, the field of science, the study and observation of nature can be considered objective reality, because that exists before any sort of human projection or human interpretation. We study science, we observe nature, and we have laws of nature, laws that don't describe why anything happens, laws that just simply observe, like the law of gravity. But then we have theories which attempt to go into detail of why, but even then theories are as they are. They stand because at the moment there is no evidence to disprove them. So that's what a theory is. It's not just some idea that exists in a person's head. They've done their research and there's just no evidence to disprove what they say at the moment. So yeah, science, objective reality. So yes, facts are objective.
I don't know. This came to my mind. I'd like to say is that I think that it's not possible for a human to be objective. It cannot be. A machine can be a higher percentage of objective than a human for certain reasons, but I think once we surpass something like 80, 90, maybe we can even talk about 99 percentile of certainty, then that might give us permission to apply objectivity or factual or truthness. So can you guys follow me to that idea? Once an idea, concept, theory, hypothesis, whatever it is, surpasses 90% certainty, then we can start applying words like objective, reality, truth, these types of things. And if that's the method, then I think we could apply it across the board, and then we could deal in those areas.
I don't think we can talk about it right now. Let me just say, because how do you know when something is 90% certain? Who defines that? No, I think this is a whole another discussion.
Millions of measurements and surveys and tests.
Yes, but still, how do you say that's 90% certain? Where does that number come from?
That's the trick. That's what we got to work on.
How many percent is the heliocentric system then? Since that's a theory too. What percentage is it?
90, 99. That's just my reality. All right, maybe you guys want to move on. All right.
Here, it comes from here. Do you know the Bell's Bell's bell? No, Gauss bell. Do you know what I mean?
Yes.
When you make a survey, you exclude 5% from this side and 5% from this side from your surveys, from your experiments. So 90% come from the middle here, and that what those 90% results from your survey you're taking into considerations, and the extremes you are eliminating. The Gauss bell.
Yeah.
This is how they do with materials when they test materials, and the same applies usually in the other fields.
I think
You know what I mean?
arbitrarily 90% is a good figure to start with to get closer to what's the truth.
It's not the answer. It's not the truth. It's not objective reality. It is just an attempt to get us out of the muck we're in right now to a less murky reality. That's all. Because if we can accomplish that, if we here can work towards educating people to do that, then they can get us to that next level that we're abstracting about. Does that make sense? So we want to abstract about the 100% certainty type of thing, or 99.99, and we're stuck in the mud right now. Can't even see straight. So I think it's just too far out there, too abstract. We have to do some kind of like halfway there thing, or some sort of just forward progression. And yeah, the forward progression still has flaws, but it doesn't mean the forward progression is not worthwhile of an endeavor. All right. Okay, cool. All right, the next, science, a method of trying to formulate predictability. Jock just simply defines science. He did it quickly. I don't know if it's his absolute definition of science, but I think it's a pretty good one. A method of trying to formulate predictability.
I'd say is one of the methods. There are many others. There is religion, for example.
That's not a method.
Well, yes, it is, but we may not agree with it. It may not be very accurate, but it is one of the methods. I would say like that. And science is just more accurate and gives us better predictability.
Yeah, science gives us 50, 60, 70% and more. And then metaphysics, religion, dogmas, they're I don't know what the numbers are. Just gonna throw out 130%, and that might be being very nice. So therefore, their science being at a higher threshold. And contrast that with certainty. Science is less certain, and religion is much more certain.
And science is also the only one that we know of that constantly reevaluates itself and tries to prove itself wrong, not to be truthful, but to get closer towards the truth. And it never assumes that things are static. So it's shown that it's the best method we have so far to solve problems and create technology and so on.
I think with science, as I mentioned before, we will receive or get all of the truth we need by, or this is just a philosophical school of thought that everything that you need to know or any truth can be achieved through observation of the natural world and the universe. And science just works to come one step closer and closer to be able to predict the natural world's behavior and how the natural world reacts to certain things, all through observation and empirical science and deductive reasoning. So science is just just our best method, our most accurate method of finding the truth. And science covers all the different fields, math, biology, physics, all of that stuff.
All right, I like it. Let's move on to questions. All right, from Roberto, you want to read it off?
Yes, my first question is, well, perhaps we can skip it, but anyway, let's read it. Jacques says, without a physical referent, we're not talking about anything specific. So should we completely avoid talking about abstract concepts?
Wow.
Yes.
Okay.
But then you can
I'm not
talk
the authority
about,
on this. That's my opinion.
yeah, but then you can talk about an RBE because that's an abstract concept in its whole.
Gravity?
We're not talking about RBE right now. I don't know what we're talking about.
Now we have to define what is abstract.
Abstract would be to be able to, my definition, be able to see or understand something from another person's perspective. Be able to understand something outside of your own point of view. So if somebody has a perception of God, you may not have ever been introduced to the idea, but you start using abstract thinking to understand how that person perceives what they're talking about, and from there you understand more and more. But about Roberto's question, I don't think we should avoid talking about abstract concepts, because I think we would be able to, through communication or through articulate communication, we'd be able to come up with some form of physical referent for these abstract ideas. I'm not entirely sure how we could do that, but I do think it would be possible.
Yes, I was meaning, like for abstract feelings, can we talk about feelings? We don't have anything. I mean, there are chemicals in the brain and everything, but we can't really touch them. We don't even understand yet exactly how things work. So, and for example, gravity is an abstract concept. It doesn't exist out there. You can touch it. You can see things falling down. That's the effect of gravity. But gravity itself is an abstract concept. No.
Well, we can, not to go off on a tangent, but gravity is extremely measurable. You can measure gravitational pull and gravitational force. I don't know what exactly is abstract about that, but
Yeah, no, I was just wanted to make the point that when Jacques says that there are, when we don't have a physical referent, we're not talking about anything specific. I don't quite agree with that, because we can talk about something which we don't have a physical referent, but it still makes sense to talk about it. So I think personally that we shouldn't just avoid talking about anything that doesn't have a specific physical referent.
I think that the abstract feelings, like love, for example, may not have a physical reference, but I think there's human action or human, you know, human behavior that we can use as a physical reference to understand, what love is. There may not be a symbol or, a concept for love, but, through our action and behavior, we can understand what love is. I can say love is when you jump in front of a car for somebody. That's pretty abstract, but, that's where you have to, start understanding it from that person's perspective to gain a better understanding of, of what, love is, or whatever abstract thing you're talking about at the moment.
The way I picture abstraction, or talking about abstract, is I'm trying to describe an idea or concept to you, and I'm going to now try to start to describe a chair to you. The chair could represent RBE, could represent a method, an idea, a concept. Now, while I'm describing this chair, it has 4 legs, has a back, you are not seeing what I'm seeing. Your brain is starting to begin to project on the wall in your head a chair with 4 legs. Maybe before I said 4 legs, your chair had 1 leg, right? And this is the problem with abstraction. It's a failure. It's not a failure. It is a insufficient communication and information flow. I'm almost there with my thinking, but the thing is, it's the point I would like to get across, and the point I think we should get across to people, is when you're dealing in the abstract, when you're teaching people in the abstract, when you're in school studying out of books, learning nearly 100% through the abstract, you're not understanding what is intended to be understood. For somebody to learn from a book how tall Mount Everest is, compared to for somebody to go see at Mount Everest, there is a huge difference. And in the future, we would want our children to have experienced Mount Everest before talking about it. If they learn, if you have a choice in every situation oh geez, I just got myself into a trap. To go between learning abstract or learning with physical reference, there you go. That's the point which I'm trying to make. That's the point I think he's trying to make. The point I think we should try to make is just simply abstraction invites misinformation, and as long as we are aware of this, we can work towards improving it.
Yeah, I think that's pretty sensible, but also whether something's abstract or not is not clear, so we should talk about anything as long as it's relevant to the topic, and if it's not, then not. It's not real complicated.
Yep. All right, Roberto, again, you did write this. We did talk about this. Next one.
Yes. The next one is Jacques. This is just a general question when talking about it, the resource-based economy with the public. So Jacques says roofs must be designed for a given area for a specific set of problems. So how will buildings be shaped in an RBE? Won't they all be dome-shaped? Sometimes I get this question, won't there be all domes?
I think cities would have whatever buildings are relevant to the area that they're in, and he even has a lot of designs that are not all dome-shaped, but they have less straight lines than most because that's stronger, but it can take many forms.
Yeah, I think for us to be able to answer this in a better way, like you said, Clifton, is that he has many designs that don't include domes. Simply, for me, the dome shape and the concrete and rebar, which is metal or steel structures, are Jacques' method to solve the issue of feeding, housing, well, in this specific case, sheltering 7 billion to 10 or more on Earth. We have to do it very efficiently in the beginning. The most efficient we can come up with. If we come up with a more efficient method than that, then that's what we should be using. That's what I call cities version 1.0. But as Jacques says, those cities will be straitjackets, meaning they will be like those inhabitants of those cities will see all the inefficiencies of the materials we use. They will see, you know, the layouts. There will be improvements. The city 2.0 may be something we can't even come close to imagining. So for the dome shape, it's maybe currently a necessity just to get, you know, the current situation handled in a sense, and then from there we might be able to measure that we are, with that design, we're extremely efficient. Like in a sense, we could be actually a little bit wasteful the next time. We may color, you know, we can say, whoa, we have with this abundance here and this abundance here, you know, we can color these things anything we want. So we can do this with them anything we want. We can make any design we want because we're now using a material that it doesn't matter the structural integrity of it. We're using nanomaterials to hold up things, and we're using understanding of the weather patterns coming to deal with the structural support rather than building in a 6-inch steel beam. So, yeah, how do we answer this? It's to take care of the necessity of 7 billion people on Earth first, then to be more creative later.
Yeah, perhaps I was thinking, because some people live, you know, in places where it's cold and it's snowing all the time. So is a dome really the best way to, you know, for a building to be in such an environment? Because if there are heavy snow loads on the roof and it's dome shaped, you might come out of the building and all the snow might fall on you. So isn't it better to have a roof that it's very slanted like this?
That's also something that could be solved with technology too. I mean, if you could heat the dome, then no snow would stay on it, it would just melt. But I think it's important to remember that his designs are just exercises of what could be, and the whole idea of an RBE is that things would be emergent and always changing, and things would never stay static, so it would always be improving.
All right, so that's clearly a little bit off topic, but we'll get into city systems again, I think. Roberto? No? Or no, made the okay, never.
It's an orientation, that lecture, so
Okay.
you don't get it in this session.
Well, you can host it, and then you can ask them. All right, so let's move on. Again, Roberto, why should you interrupt children when they're doing something interesting? Does it really work?
Yes, I can't really understand this. Does anyone have any experience with that?
Why should you interrupt them?
Jacques says in the lecture that if you interrupt someone when he's doing something interesting, this will make he will be more motivated to come back to it next time. So, for example, he makes the example of taking his children to the zoo, and then he says, "Oh, we only have 20 minutes. We have to go," and then somehow his children become more interested in it and more motivated to think about it and study it. I don't know how that works. I don't have any experience with it. Does anyone know this?
I think that has to deal with the psychology of fear of loss. When you feel like you're going to lose something, you will, you know, jump on the opportunity more quickly or preemptively. Anytime that, you know, there's something that you probably can't have, increases your desire for it. So if you're working on something interesting or something that you are intrinsically motivated for, if it's taken away from you, even for a brief moment, your mind will still be, I guess, locked within that frame of where you were when you were doing that interesting thing, and you won't. And then, you know, once you get back to it, you'll just pick back up where you left off, possibly with some new ideas. But I don't really think when he was saying that, I didn't understand it much either, and I'm not sure if I would do that when I'm a parent. But I guess there's some ethics to it. I mean, or there's some value to it. I'm not sure where he was trying to go with that entirely.
We'll cover it after we stop. Let me get to a couple more specific questions on this topic, then I'll stop the recording, and then we'll go into these other questions, all right? Maybe, okay. Oh no, we lump things together. All right, so Zach, we lump things together because of our frame of references, which allows us to arrive at opinions earlier. How detrimental can this be? Or determinant? I don't know which one. Determinist or detrimental?
Goddamn my horrible spelling. I am so sorry. That is detrimental. Damn it.
Detrimental, okay.
Oh my god. I'm embarrassed.
Okay. We lump things together because of our frame of references. So you're saying in our frame of reference we lump things together to make things easier on ourselves.
Well, Clifton also alluded to this earlier about how it became a matter, or in earlier times it became a matter of survival to be able to group things quickly so that we can arrive at snap decisions. But that sort of
categorization.
Well, yeah, I think we categorize people, we categorize concepts just so that we can understand them or think we understand them a lot more quickly. We don't want to go into detail about certain things, so we just have shortcuts to the final to the conclusion. We just take shortcuts instead of actually going through the levels of complexity. And I think that can be truly detrimental because if you don't actually go through levels 1, 2, 3, and 4 of complexity and you just shoot to number 5, then you are being very, very misguided, and whatever you're saying could be very misinformative. Just by talking strictly off categorizing and speaking off of a single frame of reference by just lumping things together. And Jacques mentions this like those damn Swedes do this or blacks do that or things of that nature.
Just gonna type out categorization is from maybe our lizard brain, and it was necessary for our survival tens of thousands of years ago. We're struggling now in technological age with still these old patterns of thought, and so with simply what we are doing right now, we're trying to grow past that, and we're struggling with that. All right. Okay. People are not conditioned to look things objectively. So what is the new definition of objective? What is the replacement? I don't know.
I think we also covered that with a pseudo.
Okay. Let me go on to VAS. Would there be a difference of the application of creativity during transition in an RBE? I don't know what that means. Would there be a difference?
I mean, would people see creativity in the resource-based economy different than how we see it now?
Of course.
How? How do you think they will see?
Well, imagine you have no knowledge in what we've been talking about today. And you're out in the world and you're being a human. Then you have education about what we're talking about today. What's the difference in you? Then project in the future where you would have actually even a higher level of education of this topic, and maybe that's what can exist in a resource-based economy. But to just guess at it, I just don't know. But certainly, of course, what we would do is what we're pointing out today. How does this tie back? We saw that the Merriam-Webster definition of creativity, I don't think it's very good, very accurate, sorry. It doesn't help. It doesn't assist a human in understanding it. Or if not the definition, the overall concept. And what we're doing here today is trying to get a more accurate assessment of that abstract concept.
All right, that makes sense.
Should we associate only with alike people in order to get more closer to the aims of TVP? I mean, that's an important question. Let's talk about that afterwards, okay?
Okay.
Even travelers or a combination of exposures to different nationalities will not make people objective. So we're still on objective. Yeah, let's go back to that. Okay, I like this one. Well, Sorry, guys. I like it. TVP is adaptive, not fixed. And that's a question for Vas. And I'll be quick about it. That yes.
You are too objective. I don't know how you succeeded to be so objective, but.
Well, we show people static images and graphics, but we're limited to that technology at this point. You know, we're limited by 1,000 things, but of course, the Venus Project. Oh, well, wait, you said the Venus Project, not a resource-based economy, didn't you?
Yes, but
Oh,
even
shit.
it matters if we speak about how it differs for the resource-based economy too. How it
All
is
right, let's
adapted.
talk about that after the recording.
Yeah, better about the Venus Project, how it is
All right.
adapted.
All right, so I'm going to wrap up. Anybody have any last thoughts? And if you can help me tie this subject back to TVP, resource-based economy.
Well, I think Jacques, in like one sentence, Jacques like really set the tone for the entire lecture, where he says that in the future, creativity will be a compilation of references of many different forms of which you can extract from, and our definition of creativity will be surpassed. So, tying it back, we should just, embrace that, what we think of as creativity now is not really what it once was, like in the Renaissance era. So moving forward, we should embrace the idea that, collecting knowledge from many different references and synthesizing them and creating a new product is going to have to be what we consider creative. And if we can embrace that, we can probably come up with a lot more pseudo creative ideas. That's just like my conclusion.
And be pseudo-objective.
Pseudo everything.
Jeez. Oh, man. All right. Well, as long as we got what we covered down, I assume from silence that everybody agrees. I don't know. That's not a very good measurement tool. Silence equals understanding.
Well, presume, assume, very mixed up a lot.
All right, I'm going to end it now. Thanks for showing up, guys. Creativity. The world understands it incorrectly, and we understand it maybe 1% better today. Woohoo! Pseudo-objective emojis. All right, I'm going to end the recording. Thanks for coming, guys, and we'll see you next week.
Thanks for hosting.
Alrighty.